All right, new day and another laptop that needs to be saved, and this time we have an Alienware M15 R4. Now, this customer purchased this as a non-working machine, except it does work. But the GPU, the 3070 graphics card, is not detected at all. It doesn't show up in the BIOS, doesn't show up in Windows. Kind of a complicated type of repair, but I haven't taken a look at this yet. Let's take a look together and see if we can get this figured out. All right, I kind of don't like these types of repairs. Whenever we have a graphics card that just doesn't show up, it usually doesn't mean we have some sort of failed part. It means we have some sort of communication issue. Sometimes it is some sort of power rail failure that's like not powering the graphics card, but it's a strange one. So might be a rabbit hole, but we'll see. I have been able to fix graphics cards on this model before in the past that weren't detected. So let's see what we can come up with. Now, first thing we want to do is see if it turns on, which it should, because they purchased it as a non-working machine, but non-working in the sense that the graphics card or the GPU, Nvidia GPU, is not showing up. And so let's just go straight to the BIOS. I just want to see what's listed there, see what shows up. It shouldn't be listed there if it's not being detected. So it does power on battery. I don't have it plugged in the wall right now. Fans are on full blast. And we have the keyboard backlight. Here, I'll go ahead and plug in the charger while we're at it, so you can keep an eye on the power meter there. All right, so we have it booted up into the BIOS. Now, right here is where we should actually have our discrete graphics card. It has 1 and 2. I don't know why they would have 2. This machine only has 1 discrete graphics card. Discrete meaning just upgraded graphics like a Nvidia or an AMD. But this one would have a 3070, I believe, RTX 3070, so it's saying none here. So it's not detected. Okay, so let's boot into Windows. I just want to see what shows up there. The other thing I want to do, actually, we'll boot in the diagnostics, because we can also look in diagnostics. A lot of times you'll see the temperature of the video card, is what they call it, have a 0 measurement. Now that means that it'd be detected, but it's just detecting 0. That's usually a different issue than the issue of the card not being detected at all. That's why I'm just trying to collect all my clues to kind of figure out what type of missing graphics card do we have, right? So do we have something that's completely, like it's not even plugged in, right? So are we missing all the power to it? Because like the power MOSFETs or something like that, the PWM controller that powers the MOSFETs on the GPU could be bad, and that would also make it just kind of disappear. Or is it a VRAM issue or something like that? So let's get into the diagnostics here. So this diagnostic screen shows us all of our temperatures. And so I want you to kind of look down here. Let's just see. We don't even have our graphics card detected here, but we do have memory thermistor at 1C, which has to be wrong. Everything else is at 30C, like room temperature basically, but we don't have a video thermistor or something like that. That's usually what it would say, something like video something. So that's not even listed, so not even showing up in the BIOS. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to boot into an operating system. They do have an install on here, so let me go ahead and get logged in on that. All right, so I'm logged in their operating system, not mine. I just want to take a look at Device Manager and see what we see. All right, so here's all of our devices. And one thing I noticed right off the bat, there is no display adapters. Kind of a strange thing to not see a display adapter when we actually have a display. Usually when you see this, it's because it is hiding the display adapter. So I'm just gonna go to hidden devices and just kind of take a look. Yeah, so the display adapter did come back. And if we look here, all we have is the UHD. And there's not even like a kind of grayed out display adapter, meaning it's never even seen or installed another display adapter. That means that this current install has never seen the discrete Nvidia graphics card ever. All right, so that's our last thing there to actually check. So the other thing that they mentioned, that down here near the clock, it's not showing that's charging, yet it is plugged in right now, and the battery percentage looks like it is going up. So it's just not having the charging indicator here. So I don't know if that's something related to the OS or if that's something else. So I think the next step is just kind of figure out, is the Nvidia graphics card actually coming on? Are we getting power to it? And are we getting power to the VRAM? Things like that, because we're going to try to figure out if it's a hardware thing or a software thing. Right now at this point, I don't think it's firmware. We can actually check to see if we are at the latest BIOS revision. We can also check to see if there is some sort of firmware for the Nvidia GPU. So let's go ahead and pull that up on Dell's site. All right, so I'm on Dell's site. We just go to the drivers. Two things I wanted to check was going to be if the BIOS revision could be upgraded. So we're just going to go to the BIOS here and see what revision we're on. We're on 133. Let's see what we have on our laptop. All right, so it looks like they're already on 133, so probably not a firmware issue. The other thing I want to check to see if there's an Nvidia firmware. So if we come down here to video, filter by that, sometimes they have a firmware, and they do have a firmware utility here. So let's go ahead and get this downloaded. Let's see if we can run this and see if that fixes the issue. Now, the fact that they're having some sort of weird like battery display issue makes me think that we could have some sort of firmware issue. So I'll also go ahead and flash their main system BIOS at the same time in case there's some sort of rogue line or something like that that got corrupted, especially in the EC chip, because it will reprogram the EC chip. That way we can kind of check the box saying firmware's been updated. All right, I'm gonna start by installing the VBIOS, or the video BIOS, for the Nvidia graphics card. Now, I'll be surprised if this actually will install, because it'll probably say that the card doesn't exist. That's generally how that works. So if it can't find the card anywhere, then it's probably not gonna be able to upgrade the VBIOS. So no display adapters were found or compatible on this device for this update. So card is still not even detected to flash the Nvidia firmware. Now, I've rarely even seen it be a VBIOS issue, but we should go ahead and keep that in the back of our heads in case we need to update that. So I'll go ahead and run this BIOS update. Even though we are at the same version, it will at least rewrite all that stuff to make sure that everything is written correctly, because it will rewrite the EC chip in case the EC chip has some sort of corruption, communication issues or something like that. So let me go ahead and get this updated and I'll be right back. All right, we have something weird going on here. So it went through and flashed the main system BIOS and then flashed the EC block here. And so it says it's 100%, but the system's just hanging. This is as far as it's going. It's just sitting here, it just keeps sitting here. It's not doing anything. Usually we'll have the system automatically reboot, but nothing is happening. I might need to shut it off. And if we do shut it off and it doesn't come back on, it's because the EC block got corrupted, and that's what's actually listening to the power button, and that's what starts up the board. So we'll have to manually program that, which we are capable of doing, so it's not a huge problem, but just want you to be aware that we are about to figure out if we have bricked a machine, because this has just been hanging here for a long time. So let me go ahead and hold down the power button and cross our fingers. Well, the power button doesn't even do anything. Okay, so do we have some sort of firmware issue? We don't know. Do we have some sort of EC issue? Do we need to replace our EC chip, reprogram it? Do we need to manually reprogram it? I have no idea if it's all related to the firmware on this machine, and that's why there's some sort of like power meter, the battery's not showing a charge meter on it, or is that just a software thing in Windows and it's unrelated? I don't know. Holding down the power button does nothing. The only thing I'm gonna be able to do is unplug the battery. Are you kidding me? I mean, I've let this thing sit here long enough, so I am going to have to do that. Let's do it for science. So the machine is still on. We're still on the EC block region, so it's basically flashing the EC chip, and it is frozen up. Does that mean that there's a bad block on the EC chip, and that's what's causing this issue? Maybe it's having some sort of read-write errors. Should I just replace the EC chip? These are all good questions here. Now, I have to say, this laptop looks brand new. It looks like it's never been used. It looks like it was pulled straight out of a box. So I don't know if it was some sort of like defect from the factory, and that's why it was sold with a non-functioning graphics card. But yeah, I mean, look how brand new this thing is. Fans are perfectly clean. All the parts inside of it are clean. Doesn't look like anybody's ever opened this up before, so I don't think it's ever been serviced. All right, still on, still sitting here. We're gonna give it its last chance here. Are you gonna shut off or not? Escape, nothing. All right, unplugging the battery. Don't do this at home, by the way. Unplug the battery. Now, is this thing gonna come back on? So I plug the battery back in. Let's plug in the power. And I did see 2 amps of current for a second, so that's something. And we do have keyboard backlight. Okay, whew. I want to try flashing the BIOS again, because I don't know if it actually worked or not. So still no graphics card showing up in here in the BIOS. What do you think? We should try flashing it one more time? Yeah, let's do that. All right, I'm back in their Windows install again. I'm gonna run the BIOS installer one more time and see if it hangs at the same spot. If it does that again 2 times in a row, then we are going to manually flash the EC chip and see if that fixes it, see if we can actually get through a full read. If we can't, then we're gonna pull the EC chip off, put a new EC chip on, and then reprogram it and see if that fixes it. And hopefully it will fix all the issues. Still don't know if it has anything to do with the graphics card, but right now we're chipping away at little things here. All right, it says updating the OEM block. It went through that really quickly, which it did before. And then right here is where it does the main BIOS, and right after that is when it says updating the EC block again. So, and that's where it hung. So I don't really know if it's loading it into memory and then trying to flash it or what. So right here, it's actually flashing the main BIOS region. And the next step is gonna be the EC chip. Now the EC chip's only like 160 kilobytes. It's really tiny compared to this, which I think is probably like 16 megs or something like that. All right, and then it switched back to that again. So it actually said BIOS region the whole time, the main region, and then it switched to update OEM EC block, and it's just hanging here again. Same as before. Definitely a strange one, because it should automatically reboot right now if everything's good, if everything checked out. So maybe we should try manually flashing the EC chip, see if it does it all the way. If it writes it all the way, perfect, no issue. If it doesn't, then we'll replace it. So that's, I think, what we're gonna do. Hold down the power button, doesn't do anything, we're gonna have to unplug it all over again. So let's do that. All right, let me make sure it turns back on before we start taking things apart. All right, still works. Okay, let me show you where the EC chip is. Let's also take a look around and see if we see any physical damage or anything like that. Now, the customer said that this hasn't been taken apart before. That's exactly what it looks like so far, but we need to kind of use our own eyes. All right, let me take this cover off. Now, a lot of times when I'm working on these systems, this cover's missing completely. Now, I can tell that this has never been taken off before, but that's the way you can access the board. It's a lot easier to take these off, but a lot of times when some other tech's been in here, it's already gone. So, looks pretty good. Here, let me show you what the EC chip is on this machine. It's gonna be this 9542GF chip. It's a BGA package. So this thing could be faulty if we are having multiple type of issues where we have some sort of like communication with the operating system to say if the battery's charging and if the Nvidia graphics card's not showing up. Also, the customer did kind of put a extensive notes explaining AI answers. So AI is pointing towards this being the issue. Now, I kind of don't think this is the issue, but we always want to try the things that are the most obvious. Let's try reprogramming this first. Now, the programming headers on this one's a little bit more complicated than other machines because there is not just a debug header. So we actually have to connect to this pad here, this pad here, this pad here, and then this one up here. And I'll have to use my PC Byte Spider. That way we can actually get a good connection. But first I want to pretend those because otherwise you're not going to get a good connection. So let me unplug the battery before we start poking around here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of solder flux on here, and we don't need much. I'm just going to try to get it because all I want to do is get these solder balls that are here to get the oxidation off of it. And if we get the oxidation off, it makes it a lot easier for our spider to actually connect to it. So let's hit that like that. And I believe it's this one. I always forget which one that one is. All right, so I have my spider pulled out here. So this is going to be a PC Bytes. Now, if you're interested in anything like this, I do have links in the video description where I just bought these on Amazon, so I put a link down there for you. And then this is going to be my EC programmer. Now, I have a link to this one, and you can't buy it on Amazon. It is from the guy who makes it, and they are kind of pricey. So for somebody who's just a hobbyist, probably not practical to get, but this will program a lot of different types of EC chips. Now, I do have a little cheat sheet. This is actually a cheat sheet that I made, but then somebody else redid it and made it so much prettier. So I appreciate one of my subscribers sending this over to me. Kind of tells me exactly what color to put where on the board, so you can kind of see what I was talking about, where we have the markings on the board here. So I'm gonna just quickly get this connected. I'm gonna skip kind of the details on that, and we'll get this program. All right, I have all those lined up on there. Now, this is just kind of trying to rule out whether the EC chip is having an issue or something like that. Loading this directly onto the chip will bypass the actual loader in case it was just kind of a loading issue. So let me see what we are able to do. All right, so we will need to plug in the power onto the motherboard. So let me plug that in, and then now we're going to check to see if we have connection. And okay, we are connected. We are connected to the EC chip. I'm going to go ahead and read and back up what they do currently have on their EC chip. Okay, that worked fine this time, so let's go ahead and write a new one on there. So I do already have one that's extracted from a BIOS, so I don't have to extract a new one, but basically what I'm doing is I'm downloading a BIOS from Dell, and then I'm extracting the contents, and there is an EC region in there. Now I have other videos showing you how to do that, so I'm not gonna go through that right this second. All right, so it is loaded in here, so this is gonna be a completely clean EC region that will put it back in the manufacturing mode, but it's writing directly onto the EC chip, so we're bypassing any of the BIOS flashing tools and for it hanging, things like that. Maybe we'll fix it. I don't know. Communication error. Interesting. All right, let me reseat all these connections, make sure we have them connected really good. There we go. That seems much better. There we go. Okay, last try, and then we're just going to replace the EC chip. Interesting. Now it's going really, really slow. Normally it's not this slow, but I can't change the speed, so I don't know. Let me just see if I can get through this, and I'll be right back. All right, false alarm. I figured out that I had forgotten to connect my ground lead. So if we look here at the ground, I was supposed to put this ground on here. So all I did is connected the 4 communication lines, which are differential signals, but I forgot to actually connect the ground here. And so without the ground connected, it was actually throwing an error. And so I'm surprised it actually was able to do a complete read, but we did get a successful read. We also were successful at getting a write and a verify. So let's see if it resolves the issue. All right, so we have the new EC programming on here. We'll see if that resolves the issue. Now, I don't think the EC chip is having an issue. At first we were having some sort of read issue, but it was just at ground. And so it's not a big deal. And it was hanging on flashing it. Again, weird symptom, but don't think it is the EC chip. And whenever I was able to actually write to it and verify, it worked just fine. So let's go ahead and turn this thing back on. This will put it back in the manufacturing mode because I did clear all that. So I'll have to get out of manufacturing mode, FNX. All right, so we have that EC chip programmed. Back in the BIOS, graphics card still not showing up. I was pretty certain that was not going to fix the issue, but we have to kind of try those other things first. Now, let's get down to business and start doing some measurements and kind of figure out, are we even getting voltage on the graphics card? So there's not too much we can see on the back of the board here, but this is going to be the CPU. This is the GPU itself. So the GPU supposedly is not detected. These are going to be capacitors that are on the core itself, or that are going to be on the power stages that power the core. And so if I measure these, we're going to have CPU voltage. If I measure these, we're going to have GPU voltage. And so that will be a good place to start. Let's see what voltage we're getting on there. We should get around 0.7 volts on our GPU. These are going to be the main power stages that power the motherboard, and there's that AC chip right there. Not too much you can see on the side of the board, like I said, the 3 volt, 5 volt, 1.8, things like that, VRAM, power supplies, all that stuff's going to be on the other side of the board, but I want to start by just at least measuring on this side. So let me go ahead and turn the board on, and we'll take some measurements. All right, so I have it turned on, and I want to measure to see what voltage we're getting on the GPU. We're only getting 0.3 volts. Now that is not good. Now what that usually is the startup voltage, and then it should actually trigger up to 0.7 or 0.75 or something like that, but we're only getting 0.3. And let's see what the CPU is doing. CPU is at 1.1, 2, 3. It's moving around. See, that's what it's supposed to be doing because it's actually booting up. It's actually processing data through the CPU, but the GPU is not triggering on. A couple different things here. We know that the power stages are on, so we know the PWM controller is working. Now, whether it's getting all the signals it needs in order to trigger on correctly, I don't know, but the way that these GPUs operate, you have the main power rail, and then you're going to take that power rail and you're going to produce multiple power stages that power the GPU, and you're going to have a PWM controller, which gives a pulse width modulation to each one of those power stages to create a stable voltage that the GPU can use, because it can't use 20 volts, it needs 0.7 volts or 0.75, whatever it is exactly. But we're only getting 0.3. I'm going to have to pull the board at this point to kind of start taking some measurements, and we also want to do a physical inspection because we don't want to waste too much time and then have some sort of components that's ripped off the board. The board does look new. All this looks new. It looks like it hasn't been taken apart, but who knows, right? We never know if what the backstory is, especially if someone bought this as a not working unit. Maybe someone else messed with it first. So let's just do a quick look around the board, and then we'll pull the motherboard out. All right, so we'll start over here. This is the DC jack. This is where the voltage comes in. We do have a diode that's a little crooked. This diode's a little crooked. I see that quite often. Usually the solder joints on those are a little bit loose, or there's a little extra solder there. So if anybody's reflowing things, or whenever the board's actually getting flowed for the first time, they move around a little bit. There's going to be a current sense resistor. That's our power management chip. That's what controls the input MOSFETs. We do have a power switch on the board. There's our EC chip we programmed. We have a couple more current sense resistors. This is going to be where the touchpad plugs in. We have two different touchpad connectors because this board actually goes into a 17-inch and a 15-inch. This is going to be for our Tron lights, or all of our alien headlight stuff. There's the back of our GPU, the back of our CPU. There's our LCD connector, and then we have a RAM, onboard RAM on this, so you can't upgrade it, but it is DDR4. So taking a quick look around, I don't see anything ripped off the board. I don't see anything to make me concerned that there is something damaged on the board, because everything does still look new. So let me go ahead and get the board pulled out. We're gonna have to take measurements while the board's out. We're gonna have to kind of look at it under the thermal camera. We're gonna have to kind of do things in a way where it's on the bench, because everything's on the other side of the board, and there's no way for us to plug a screen in, power on the board, and see all the power rails that are coming on without having it just sitting on the bench and having a screen on the bench and things like that. So we're gonna do whatever we can in order to visualize what the error is. Yeah, so looking here, this LCD connector has never been unplugged. So I think that we're safe to say that this board's never been pulled out, and this must be all stock. So I'm wondering why the graphics card had failed. Maybe it never worked. So whenever this laptop was made or produced, it never worked or something like that. I don't know, because it doesn't look like any of this stuff has been undone, and the laptop looks absolutely brand new. Yeah, all these stickers that hold these wires in place have never been unstuck before. All right, so motherboard is out. A little bit dirty, but not too bad. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the heatsink too, because we have to get down to where the power stages are for the GPU. And what we wanna do is we wanna turn on the board under the thermal camera, and we wanna see if the power stages are heating up equally, or if they even try to turn on all the way. We also wanna measure the voltage on the VRAM and see if we are getting VRAM voltage. If we have all of our voltages, then we need to kind of address what would not allow the GPU to be detected, because if we are getting our voltages, then it means it's triggering on, but at the same time, if we're only getting 0.3 volts, that means it's not actually triggering on all the way. It means it's kind of starting up, but not working all the way. All right, take this off here. We got factory thermal paste. So nothing suspicious there. All right, CPU here, that's just a regular RAM. VRAM's around here. VRAM power supply's there. These are gonna be the power stages for the GPU. So this is gonna be the video BIOS for the GPU, but we already tried to flash that. We couldn't do it because the actual card wasn't detected. So here's what I wanna measure. I wanna see if we have voltage here, and I wanna see if we have voltage on this. These are all gonna be tied together to the same point, so you measure one spot, you measure them all. That's actually for the RAM, so we know that's working. So let's go ahead and power it on. So I'm just gonna plug a test DC jack in here. And then let's get the thermal camera pulled up so we can take a look at that. All right, I have the thermal camera pulled up. Now, what I wanna do is I wanna look at this when it powers on. That's what we're kind of trying to pay attention to, and then we're gonna measure the voltage at the same time. So this spot right here is actually just a reflection, a thermal signature of my light here. Even if I turn my light off, it doesn't go away. It doesn't matter, so I'm just gonna have to kind of move it around. We're gonna have that issue whenever we have a lot of heat on our thermal cameras, detecting a lot of heat. So let me plug this in. So I have it plugged in right now. I'm gonna have to hit the power button, which is on the other side of the board. All right, you see that we have all the power stages on the GPU coming on. We have the VRAM coming on. You see how it's heating up there, and then the CPU is coming on. All right, so now you can see everything lighting up here. So all of these power stages are coming on, but I don't see the GPU coming on. See, the GPU is not coming on at all, but we do have these power stages coming on. What does that mean? It means that they are working. They're just not starting up all the way. So I don't think the board's actually telling it to actually start the GPU at all. And we do see that even the VRAM is lit up here, but I want to get the measurement on the VRAM and see if we are getting full voltage there, because that could be the issue. Now we have to do this quickly because I don't want to leave it on too long without having a heatsink on it. All right, and so the VRAM is measuring at 1.2 volts. So we have that going, and then the actual cores are all at 0.3, 0.29. So something is causing the GPU to not start up all the way. Now, at this point, I don't know exactly what it is. There are a few different things we can look at. Is it going to be a corrupted VBIOS? I don't know. I've never seen it be the VBIOS, so I'm not 100% convinced on that. The other thing is it could be something to do with this crystal oscillator right here. I have seen that be an issue. The crystal oscillator is in charge of keeping the GPU in time, and then if it's not actually keeping a nice, clean signal, or clock, then it will actually not start the GPU, and I've seen that plenty of times. So let's get our oscilloscope out and measure and see if we are getting our, I think it's 25 megahertz, 27, something like that, and see if we are getting a correct signal there. All right, I got the oscilloscope set up here. Now we're just gonna try to see if we are getting the right signal here. And I'm gonna kind of do multiple measurements all at the same time. I'm gonna plug in the board, try to power it on. I'm gonna see if we are measuring the 0.3 and we'll measure the crystal all at the same time and kind of see if anything changes. Sometimes I've found that if we measure the crystal, we'll have an issue or we'll have something change on the voltage on the power rails for that Nvidia graphics card. So let's go ahead and turn the board on and measure the crystal oscillator. I want to see if we are getting a signal there or not, if we are getting a dirty signal or a clean signal. All right, so I'm just going to hold the probe on there. Nothing. Let me go ahead and hit the power button. And now we're getting some pulsing going on here. And I'm not seeing anything steady. So I don't see the 25 megahertz. I believe that's what signal we're supposed to have there. Let me try one of these other pads here. I'm gonna reset it. I'm not leaving it on for too long because we don't have a heatsink, so I have to be a little bit careful. Okay, and so it's gonna be this line right here. Yeah, and that looks pretty dirty. I wanna look at it while I'm under the thermal camera here, so let's add that on here. Let me try it again. So I'm gonna turn it on. All right, so here's the GPU right here. Let's just see what voltage you're at. 0.3, and then we're gonna measure. We're getting pulses here. Interesting. Okay, so I don't know. So we may have an issue with that. It looks pretty dirty to me. It doesn't look like it's working properly. So here's what I'm gonna try. I'm gonna power it on at the same time, and I wanna measure the power rail. I wanna measure everything. We're gonna try to figure out exactly if we are getting a bad signal or not. So what I'm trying to figure out is if we're actually getting 0.7 at all whenever we turn on the board. So if I turn on the board, I'm measuring the voltage. We get 0.7, goes down to 0.02, and then turns back off. Now it's back on, back off. Okay, but the GPU never starts up, and it just sits there at 0.3. And then I want to see what frequency we have on here. So let me go ahead and measure that. And right as I touch it, it jumps to 0.7. Yeah, so I think that conclusively says we must have some sort of weird signal on that crystal oscillator. And I've had to replace these in the past to actually fix a similar issue. So let me go ahead, and I think the best bet would just be to change that out. I do have some. Let me grab one of those and get that replaced. All right, so this is pin 1 right here. So let's just see how my chips are laid out. Okay, so these actually say PG on it, but we're just gonna put it where the font matches, or the text matches the same direction. Now, I've bought these in the past to fix a similar issue on the same machine, so hopefully this would resolve the issue. Okay, there's the old one. I'm gonna grab a new one. And if you're wondering which crystal oscillator they are, it's gonna be this one that goes to the M15 R3 and M15 R4. I bought 50 of them. All right, so we'll put it like that. All right, so we have that installed. Now, the likelihood of this fixing it is, I don't know, what do we got, 50-50? The fact that I've replaced this before and it's fixed this exact issue does help out the odds, I think. But whenever we measured it, we were getting a dirty signal, and then whenever we touched it, the voltage on the GPU went up to 0.7, which is what we want, or 0.75, but the GPU still never came on, so maybe it needed to be a good signal from the start. I don't know. Let's take a look. I actually want to do this under the thermal camera. All right, the board's a little bit hot still, but really what I want to see is if the Nvidia chip is going to start heating up. But I'm going to go ahead and measure the voltage of the V-core for the GPU at the same time. All right, so we're going to power it on 3, 2, 1. 0.7, went back to 0.3 for a second. Come on. 0.7, 0.2, and back to rest. So it's still not getting past that boot point that we're having before. I'm gonna see if I can measure the frequency now and see if it looks better. Still looks dirty. And we're just sitting there at 0.29. But right as I touch it, it goes to 0.7. Is the GPU coming on? GPU is getting warm. Let's see, let's try this again. And now it's coming on. Now it's coming on, look at that, 0.74. The GPU is coming on hot. All right, I think we got it. I don't know, I didn't do anything different. I just unplugged stuff and it was like, okay, let's just try it one more time. Okay, I think we have the GPU coming on. Why is that? I don't know, but was it the crystal oscillator? Was it the active measuring? Is it the double slit experiment all over again? All right, I got the motherboard reinstalled. I'm gonna boot straight into the BIOS. I just wanna see if the graphics card is showing up now. Is the current a little bit higher than it was before? I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't really paying attention before on how high the current was going. But if the GPU is truly coming on, like it looked like it was, then we should have higher current. We're still in developer mode. Okay, let's get that out. It's booting the Windows. I tried to go into the BIOS. I wanted to go in the BIOS first to actually look to see if it was showing up. I guess Windows will be a consolation prize here. Okay, we're back in their Windows, 3 amps. I don't have the battery actually plugged in right now. Still don't see that display adapter there. So was that a false reading? I'm not seeing the actual GPU here, but we did see it come on for a second, didn't we? I swear, it was heating up. We had all the cores on there. That's why I'm trying to get into the BIOS. Yeah, it's still not showing up here. Let's play around with this a little bit. I'm gonna see if I can get this set up where it's on the bench and we can actually mess with the underside while we're dealing with it, because I want to see if we can get this thing to turn on. Because there may be something intermittent and maybe it's coming and going. Is that what's going on? All right, let me do this again. I'm just gonna do it on the bench. I want to measure the voltage on the GPU, because we saw it jump up to 0.7 and then go back down to 0.3, but then whenever we had it actually come on, it stayed at 0.7. So I'm measuring it right now. 0.7, 0.3, 0.7, 0.3, and 0.7 now. Is there a cracked solder joint under here? I just pressed this and it came on. Wait a minute. Okay, that's a good test. So let me try this again. Do we have a cracked solder joint under the GPU? And so maybe that had something to do with whenever we were measuring the crystal oscillator, we were pressing down on the board a little bit. So 0.7, 0.3, nothing's happening. I just touch here lightly. Nothing's happening if I press down. No, it's not working. Let me reset it and try it again. We definitely had the GPU show up for a second. Let me plug it back in and see if we can get it to show up for a second and see if we can actually see it with our own eyes in the BIOS. So if we're having something intermittent, which I tend to believe that maybe our new crystal oscillator is making it work a little bit, but not all the way. And those crystals that I bought them from AliExpress, so they're not like OEM. And so maybe I should take one off a donor board. I have plenty of donor boards for these machines. They might be better. So that might be another option if the crystal oscillator is actually helping, but there could be something else on that line that's making it dirty. So, I mean, there's a lot to this, but I feel like we're making progress, or it's just a symptom that we didn't know was happening. Okay, power button. Machine's powering on. 0.7 for a second, 0.3. 0.7. Okay, and then I'm gonna press right here. It's not working. All right, let me reset it. I don't know. I'm just gonna keep messing with this until I can get 0.7 there, and then we're gonna try to get in the BIOS and see if it shows up. Is it a press that does it, or is the crystal over here somewhere? Okay, I'm gonna lay it down again. This is kind of getting frustrating. Look, now it's at 0.74. Okay, so now if we go in the BIOS, is it there? It's not there. Okay, let's see, do we have the voltage again? Because we had to do a reset just then. Am I on the wrong track? This is what I don't know. 0.74. So we actually have our voltage. So we got our voltage on the GPU, but it's still not detected. So our goal was to get the voltage on there, but now it's still not detected. Still not detected. Okay, I have a feeling that there's something up with that crystal oscillator we installed. Let me install a OEM one. I don't know why, I have just a feeling that there's something wrong with that. All right, so I'm gonna pull this one back off. Then I'm just gonna take one off of a donor board, and we can actually get the orientation correct. This one does look a little bit cheap. And I'm not sure if I ended up using this to fix it or not whenever I did the repair before, but I know I bought some of these. All right, got that one off of there. Let me grab a donor board. All right, so we're gonna steal this one. And this one is OEM, so we don't have to be concerned with it not being good enough, but whether it's functional is a totally different question, but the odds of this is not functional, I think, would be a lot lower, so. All right, so here's the OEM one installed. Now my theory is, originally I was kind of thinking that when I was squeezing the board or pushing down on the back of the GPU, it was actually flexing and causing some sort of connection issue, but now I'm starting to think that maybe I was touching a signal on the back of the crystal oscillator, which if I do touch that with the probe, it automatically jumps up to the 0.7, and I think that the signal's a little late to get the 0.7, so therefore that's why it's not turning on, and that's why it's not detecting, even though we are getting the voltage. So anyway, that's just my theory. Let's just try it out. All right, let's power the board one more time under the thermal camera. What we want to see is that GPU getting hot, and we want to see 0.7 volts here. Come on. And we're at 0.7, 0.9. That's what we saw, we wanted to see, and that's right off the bat. So that looked much better than the original, right? Because I just was measuring right on the coils. It didn't go down to 0.3 at all. It went 0.7, 0.9, 0.7, 0.9, and that's what we wanted. It's actually starting the phases up. Does that mean that the crystal oscillator that we put on, that was the AliExpress ones, were inferior, or were they wrong, or did I overheat them when I was installing it, or I don't know what that means. I know that these things are pretty picky on getting the actual oscillating frequency at a precise frequency, and we're not able to get a clean signal whenever I'm trying to measure it. All right, I got the motherboard installed again, and let me go ahead and reset the max current on the power meter, and that way we can kind of see what it gets up to, see if it's getting up to something higher. I don't have an SSD in here, so that way we can just get straight into the BIOS instead of it booting past it to the OS, and let's see what it does. So 0.4, 0.7. We got it. Look at that. So we have the RTX 3070 GPU is now detected in the BIOS. Let's boot to an operating system and test it. All right, before I boot all the way to the operating system, I'm going to go back into the BIOS one more time because I had to install the SSD and unplug everything. I just want to make sure it's still there. Still there. SSD is there. All right, let's do this. Now, at this point, I'm pretty glad that I stuck to my gut, thinking that that crystal oscillator I installed was not working properly, because when we put it on there, we actually got a little bit different results because we were getting up to that 0.7, but it wasn't all the time, and sometimes it looked like it was going to come on, sometimes it wasn't. So these things are pretty picky with what frequency they're oscillating at, and by putting in one off of a donor board, it kind of rules out any other type of situation that could cause the GPU not to be detected. Now, is it going to be here? We got it right there. Display adapter, no driver installed. Give it a moment. It's going to install the driver, hopefully. This is the customer's install, so I don't even know if they have the driver on here or not, but let me see if I can get the driver installed, and I'll be right back. The Nvidia driver is installing, so it means it does detect the card itself. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I'm happy to know that the actual card is being detected and that it's allowing it to install the driver. And I'm going to update the VBIOS after this too, because before we weren't able to do that because the card wasn't detected, but now it's detected. Now, is it fixed for good? I would like to think so. I hope so. So like I said, when I had fixed this in the past, it was because that crystal oscillator was having some sort of like dirty signal, and replacing it, it did fix it in that machine. That was over a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when I did that. So definitely a weird one, a strange one, but I'm hoping this is the solution to this repair. All right, so the driver installed successfully. We now have an RTX 3070 GPU installed on here. And a couple things I've noticed since I've been in here, the fans are not running at full blast. The fans were running at full blast earlier. And the other thing was, if you look down here at the clock, where the battery meter is, it's now showing charging. So earlier it was not having the lightning bolt there, it was just showing a battery and it wasn't actually saying it was charging. So it looks to me like that crystal controlled a few different things. It wasn't just for the actual GPU. But last thing I want to do before I call this good is I want to run a stress test on it. I want to see if we are getting good frame rate. And there we go. Firmware is running at full speed, 124 frames per second, no issues. The card is now detected. So I'm happy to report that it was just a crystal oscillator that was causing this issue. And whenever I replaced it with the one that I had that was inferior probably, it was kind of working. It was intermittent, and we were only knowing that it was actually turning on occasionally is whenever we were measuring the voltage and we saw it go up to 0.7 volts. But now that we replaced it with the one from a donor board, everything is working good. Now, of course, I'll take it apart and I'll redo all the thermal paste and I'll get this thing all ready to go back to the customer. And if you love the videos I'm making here, make sure to subscribe, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this one, and thanks for watching.
I saved another laptop!